This is Learning with Coach History. This is Lesson 4 on the New Deal, Culture in the 1930s. Vocab, Gone with the Wind, Orson Welles, Richard Wright, Zora Neale Hurston, and The Grapes of Wrath. The 1930s were a golden age for the radio and film industries in spite of the hard economic times. About two-thirds of Americans went to a movie once a week. Hollywood studios made a wide variety of movies, including comedies, musicals, love stories, and gangster films. Some films offered escape from the realities of the Depression. One of the most famous and popular films of all time was Gone with the Wind in 1939. Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers were dancing partners who made many movies together. Other popular movies in the 1930s included The Wizard of Oz and the Disney animated film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Audiences flocked to see Marx Brothers comedies. They also went to gangster movies featuring characters struggling to succeed in a difficult environment that people lived in the Depression could understand. Some films, such as Mr. Deeds Goes to Town in 1936 by director Frank Capra, showed New Deal accomplishments positively. Capra's film also included honest, kind-hearted people who won out over greedy people. Radio showed the dramatic spirit of the times. There were radios in nearly 90% of American homes. Radio was the most direct means of reaching the American people. Most American families spent several hours a day listening to dramas and variety programs. Soap operas, named for the soap companies that sponsored them, played during the late mornings or early afternoons to reach homemakers. Children's programs, such as The Lone Ranger, played in the late afternoon. Orson Welles created one of the most famous radio broadcasts of all times. He was an actor, director, and writer. In 1938, audiences heard that Martians had invaded Earth. Some people panicked. However, they were hearing a radio drama based on the novel The War of the Worlds. The broadcast showed the power of radio at a time when many Americans got their news that way. Radio made Bob Hope, Jack Benny, George Burns, and Gracie Allen stars long before they had success on television. And to reach the greatest number of people, President Roosevelt went to the radio during his famous fireside chats. The art, music, and literature of the Depression were more serious and sober than radio and movies. However, much of the artistic work had an uplifting message and emphasized the strength of character and democratic values of Americans. Many New Deal officials believed the arts were important for the nation. They created several programs to put artists to work. For example, the Federal Arts Project was part of the WPA. It paid artists to create posters, murals, and other works of art for public places to promote positive images of American society. Artists include Edward Hopper, Jackson Pollock, and Grant Wood. Wood's American Gothic, a portrait of a serious-looking man and woman standing in front of their farmhouse, remains symbolic of life during the Depression. The Federal Theater Project, also part of the WPA, supported American playwrights and hired actors to perform plays. Woody Guthrie was a folk singer who used music to capture Depression hardships. Forced from his home by the Dust Bowl, Guthrie traveled west and wrote about the trials of the journey. Guthrie's "This Land Is Your Land" is a classic American folk song, and he had a major influence on American folk music. The Federal Writers Project funded writers such as African American writer Richard Wright. He received aid while writing Native Son, a novel showing the problems racism caused for a young African American man. Zora Neale Hurston wrote Their Eyes Were Watching God, the story of an African American woman growing up in rural Florida. One of the country's most famous authors, John Steinbeck, also got help from the FWP. His novel, The Grapes of Wrath, showed the problems faced by Oklahoma farmers forced from their homes during the Dust Bowl. They became migrant workers and ended up in California, where their hardships continued. From an Irish working-class neighborhood in Chicago to the poverty of Missouri coalfields to sharecroppers in Alabama, writers told of difficulties during the 1930s for different groups. The play Our Town